Epictetus, the slave who taught emperors how to think. Epictetus began his life with almost nothing that would suggest a future as one of history's most influential philosophers. He was born into slavery in the 1st century, in what is now Turkey, and spent his early years owned by a wealthy secretary to the Emperor Nero, a man named Epaphroditus, not exactly known for his kindness. According to some accounts, his master deliberately twisted or broke his leg as punishment, leaving Epictetus permanently disabled for the rest of his life. Some ancient sources even claim he warned his master calmly, even as it happened, that the leg would break if he kept twisting it. And then, when it did break, simply noted that he'd said it would happen, without anger, without pleading. It's worth sitting with that for a moment, before going any further. This is a man who, by any reasonable measure, had almost total control taken away from him. His body wasn't fully his own. His time wasn't his own. His freedom, his safety, even his physical health. All of it existed at someone else's mercy for years. And yet Epictetus is remembered today not for the suffering he endured, but for building one of the most practical, resilient philosophies in human history, entirely out of the experience of having so little control over his own life. Despite his circumstances, Epictetus was permitted to study philosophy, reportedly under a Stoic teacher named Musonius Rufus, one of the most respected philosophers in Rome at the time. This alone tells us something about the specific household he belonged to. Not every enslaved person in Rome had any access to education, let alone philosophical training under a well-known teacher. Something in Epictetus clearly showed enough promise that his position afforded him this unusual opportunity. Eventually, he was freed, likely after Nero's death in the year 68, during a period of upheaval when many people connected to the old regime found their circumstances changing rapidly. As a free man, Epictetus began teaching philosophy himself and later opened his own school. Marcus Aurelius, born into more privilege than almost anyone alive, later studied his ideas closely and referenced them throughout his own private journal. A formerly enslaved man ended up shaping the mind of the most powerful man in the world, a generation after his own death. At the center of everything Epictetus taught is a single idea, so simple it can sound almost too basic the first time you hear it, and yet difficult enough that most people spend their entire lives failing to actually live by it. It's usually called the dichotomy of control, and it works like this. Everything that exists can be sorted into two categories: things that are within your control and things that are not. Within your control. Your own judgments, your own choices, your own effort, your own values, how you choose to respond to whatever happens to you. Not within your control. Other people's opinions of you, your reputation, your health, your wealth, the actions of others, and, as Epictetus knew from direct, personal experience, even your own body at times, and your own freedom. His argument was that almost all human suffering comes from confusing these two categories, from investing our peace of mind in things that were never actually ours to control in the first place. If your sense of worth depends on other people's opinions, you've handed control of your own peace of mind to people who might never give it back to you fairly. If your happiness depends entirely on your health, your wealth, or events going exactly the way you planned, you've built your entire well-being on a foundation that can be taken from you at any moment, the way almost everything was taken from Epictetus himself. This wasn't meant as an excuse for passivity, and it's one of the most common misunderstandings about his teaching. Epictetus wasn't telling people to simply accept whatever happens and stop trying to improve their circumstances. He was drawing a much more precise line. Put your full effort and attention into the things you actually control, and stop wasting energy fighting, resenting, or agonizing over the things you don't. Do your best work. Choose your responses carefully. Then let go of the outcome, because the outcome was never fully yours to control in the first place. It's an idea that becomes far more powerful once you start noticing how much of daily frustration actually comes from violating it without realizing it. Getting furious at traffic, as if you could control other drivers. Losing sleep over what someone thinks of you, as if their opinion belonged to you. Feeling like a failure because a plan you executed well still didn't produce the result you wanted, as if outcomes were ever entirely within your hands. Epictetus would say all of that suffering comes from the same root mistake, trying to control something you were never actually able to control, and neglecting the one thing you always could. Consider how this plays out at work, which is probably the most common place people violate the dichotomy without noticing. You prepare thoroughly for a presentation, argue your case clearly, and still don't get the promotion. The natural reaction is to treat that as a personal failure, proof that something is wrong with you. Epictetus would draw a sharper distinction. Your preparation, your effort, your argument, all of that was within your control, and by his framework, all of that is where your self-judgment should actually live. Whether the decision-makers recognized it, whether office politics intervened, whether budget constraints made the outcome impossible from the start, none of that was ever yours to control. Judging yourself by an outcome you never had full power over is, in his terms, simply a category error. The same logic applies to relationships. You can offer honesty, patience, and genuine effort to someone you care about. Whether they receive it well, whether they change, whether the relationship improves, that part depends on another person's choices, which belong entirely to them. This doesn't mean giving up on people. It means locating your peace of mind in your own conduct, rather than in an outcome that was always partly out of your hands. The practical version of this, if you want to actually apply it, is a simple pause before reacting to anything frustrating. Ask whether what just happened falls inside your control or outside it. If it's inside, your effort, your attitude, your next action. That's where your energy belongs. If it's outside, someone else's mood, a decision already made, weather, traffic, the past. No amount of frustration will move it, and the frustration itself becomes the only thing actually costing you anything. Given how his own life started, there's a particular weight to hearing this philosophy from Epictetus specifically. This wasn't a comfortable man theorizing about hardship he'd never faced. This was someone who had almost everything external taken from him at different points in his life, and who still insisted, with total conviction, that none of it had touched the one thing that actually mattered, his own mind and his own choices about how to use it. He never wrote anything down himself, as far as we know. Everything we have from Epictetus, including the collection known as the Enchiridion and a longer set of lecture notes called the Discourses, comes from a student of his named Arrian, who transcribed his teachings during lectures, much the way a student today might take detailed notes in a university class. Epictetus taught through spoken dialogue and direct engagement with his students, rather than formal written treatises, and it's really only because Arrian took the trouble to write it all down that any of it survived at all. That fact alone says something about the kind of teacher he was. He wasn't building a monument to himself. He was trying to give people in the room with him a tool sturdy enough to survive whatever life did to them next, the same tool that had gotten him through slavery, injury, and the total unpredictability of belonging, for years, to someone else. 2,000 years later, the tool still works exactly the same way, on exactly the same problem, whether the thing outside your control is a traffic jam or something far heavier. Subscribe for the next episode, where we'll walk through the actual morning routine Marcus Aurelius built, using ideas exactly like this one.